Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another My Sunderland 11 episode. As always, we are in association with the Sunderland Food Bank, so all details on how you can donate are in the description below. If you do like what you see, please do subscribe to the channel. With me, a very, very special guest. We have the BBC Radio Newcastle Sunderland commentator, Nick Barnes. Nick, how are you?
Very good. Apart from my wild lockdown hair, everything's absolutely fine. Thank you.
Yeah, good to hear. Good to hear. Obviously, you're back commentating now and have been for the season. How was it when you went straight back into commentating from that big lockdown, and what was different?
It was all a bit strange because we weren't quite sure what we were sort of returning to in terms of how the dynamic would work with no supporters in the stadium. So it was all a bit odd to begin with, just getting used to going to grounds with nobody in them, and sort of adjusting to the acoustics of that and the difference it means to you when you're commentating. There are tiny little things like when a goal is scored, when you've got fans in the ground, you sort of wrap yourself up in their emotions. You use their reactions in many ways to help you with the commentary, because it gives you a few seconds to pause if you want to make sure you've got the goal scorer absolutely right, because you can be carried along by the noise of the crowd. And of course, we just haven't got that with no fans in the ground. So that was the first sort of hurdle to overcome. And now we're within another one, in that the BBC is not allowing us to go to away games. So we're having to do commentary of the away matches off the stream or off the TV, which again is another challenge. It's a fresh challenge. It's different. It's quite hard. It doesn't help when there are delays or the screen buffers. And again, you're working without any atmosphere. You're working in that sort of bubble again of having no atmosphere, and also no periphery vision. You can't see what's happening away from where the camera is shooting. One frustration, for instance, the other night against MK Dons, was when the camera just sat filming Grant Leadbitter at a corner. Meanwhile, there were something like 8 substitutions taking place, which we couldn't see. And then you spent the next 10 minutes trying to work out who's gone off, who's come on, and hope that they put something up on the screen to try and aid you there. So there are different challenges, and it's all very odd, and it's all very weird. And the sooner we can get back to normality, the better.
Yeah, no, I think it has been really strange. Obviously, with the no rule of not going to away games as well, and I think that is quite strange, really, of how you're just watching a stream, and it's the same for me at home, because there's things going on. You just I wish the camera would just turn around, and it's hard. I'm sure it's easier at home games where you can just look down on the pitch and see everything happening.
Well, I actually really look forward to home games now, just so I can see live football and you can see what's happening, and you can get what you do get when you're at the game is an intuitive sort of feel for where the game's going, if you like, which you don't really get off the television or off a computer screen, because it's too fragmented. You don't get that overall picture, and it's been quite interesting actually having to do the commentaries on the computer screen or off the television, to actually it registers just how important it's been to be at the game in the flesh, to actually get the wider picture. I think we sort of have forgotten how much we rely on the sort of the bigger picture, to be able to see when a substitution's being made, to be able to see from a goal kick where everybody is where they are on the pitch, when there are off the ball incidents, when something happens off the side of the pitch. All those little things make up the whole, and also getting the overall umbrella view of the pitch, so you can get a sense of the way that the match is unfolding is lost to you when you're watching it on a stream or off the TV.
Yeah, absolutely. Just want to ask, obviously, you've been fortunate enough, I mean, unlike a lot of other Sunderland fans, to actually be there at the home games and watch the game go on. But how is it at a stadium of with no fans there and a game actually go on? What's the atmosphere like?
Well, there is no atmosphere, basically. I mean, you can just hear the players and the coaching staff. It'd be rather like going along and watching I'd say a reserves game, under 23s game, but even then you get people in the stadium to watch the games. It's just very surreal. It's uncomfortable in lots of ways because the stadium is so vast, it's so big that you've got to pinch yourself to a certain extent that it's actually a real football league game, or cup game or whatever it might be, that it actually has some importance and relevance, in the wider scheme of things over a season. And it's we are getting used to it because we're coming in, every other week, and the more you do, the more games you cover in that circumstance, you do sort of adjust to it. But I don't think we'll ever get used to it because it's so forbidding in many ways, because you're hankering for someone to be in the stadium, hankering for some reaction, hankering for a noise or an atmosphere, something to give the match itself some relevance in your own mind, that this game that's being played is important.
Yeah, I completely agree. I just want to ask you, really, what you have seen this season. How do you think the season's gone so far, and what do you sort of make of it?
I think it's gone okay. I mean, this sort of rather bizarre home and away record when, I think the game the other night against MK Dons was a very good illustration of how much better Sunderland are playing away from home and much more relaxed and attack-minded they are, even though it took, changes in the second half to really sort of step up into the attacking gear. Whereas at home, there's this hesitancy, this nervousness, this fear when away teams come to the Stadium of Light that, you're sort of on tenterhooks as to who's going to score first. And even when Sunderland score first, you're desperate for the second goal and it doesn't arrive. And so there's this strange relationship between home and away form. And, on one hand, I look at it and say, look at the table. They're in the playoff area. They're certainly, knocking on the door. It might be tough to get into the top two positions, but, they're still on course to be involved in the shake-up at the end of the season. But then the other side of me says, have I seen enough yet to convince me that this is a team that can get promoted? And I'm not sure yet that we have. I mean, and the bottom line is the problem up front in scoring goals. Credit to Charlie White for turning his Sunderland career around this season. And, without him, it would be very, very worrying because goals really aren't coming from the rest of the team. There's the odd goal from McGeady or Ledbetter or whoever it might be, but it's not, as Lee Johnson has said, the centre-back should be getting 4 or 5 a season. The midfield should be getting 10, 11, 12 a season. You should have 2 players up front getting 15, 20 goals a season, and Sunderland are just not in that bracket at the minute. I'm hoping with the additions they've made in January and the fact that Gooch and O'Nien and the like are coming back, that might improve. But I think at the moment the jury's out. And I think under Lee Johnson, it's been a bit stop-start, but I think there are signs, that things are going to turn and get better. So they're moving in the right direction, but at the moment, I think the jury's out on as to whether this team is capable of actually winning or mounting a serious promotion challenge.
Yeah, one thing you get to do after the games is interview the manager. I think for home games you're doing that. How have you found Lee Johnson when he came in? How was he sort of different to Parkinson? And do you think he was sort of a good choice as manager?
Well, his track record suggests he is. He's done well at Bristol City and Oldham, Barnsley. I mean, he's well versed in management, and he's slightly unlucky with Bristol City not to take them into the Premier League. He's certainly ambitious. He's very focused. He's a reader of the game in every sense, the literal sense, and also in the sort of metaphorical sense, in sort of the looking at the psychology of the game, the literature of the game, and basically absorbing every aspect of football. So he's a very sort of young and upcoming coach, if you like. He's engaging. He speaks well. Perhaps he bamboozles a few people in his pre-match press conferences. Perhaps he speaks too much at times, but he's generally very honest in his post-match appraisals. And thus far, he's been very good with the media. He's embraced that. It's early days. This is another aspect of the lockdown that normally, when a new manager comes in, you see them face to face a couple of times a week. You get to know them. You get an instinct as to how they work and what makes them tick. But it's very, very difficult at the moment because all the pre-match press conferences are conducted on Zoom. The post-match, we have to be socially distanced, and it's a bit of a farrago in setting up microphones and so on. And we're all masked, so it's all very odd. But thus far, it's been encouraging.
That's good to hear. It's good to hear. So, Nick, just before we go through the starting 11, a little bit more just about you now. So, you're from the sort of the southwest of England and commentated over a few different clubs, and you've been at Sunderland since 2003. So, you've actually commentated Sunderland my entire lifetime. So, I was born in 2003. So, yeah, you can have that one. So, just my question really is: you spent a lot of time at Sunderland. Your life's been sort of non-stop Sunderland for coming up to 18 years now. So, I asked the guests the same question: what does Sunderland AFC mean to you?
Well, it's really my life. I mean, it's 24/7. You basically, it's like an intravenous drip. You live it and breathe it constantly. There's no sort of escape from it, and you absorb. I think over the 18 years, I've absorbed the culture, the community, the club, its history. You become a part of the fabric, really. You're sort of embroidered within the fabric of the football club. And, you have to travel with the highs and the lows. And I think, like all fans, good results affect your weekend and bad results affect your weekend. Or, midweek games, good results likewise affect you for the rest of the week. Bad results affect you and how you respond at work and how you respond to the manager or the players and so on. And so you're on this endless roller coaster, really, and as I say, you're intricately woven into the fabric of the football club.
Yeah, I think also myself as a Sunderland fan, when they like listening to you and Gary Bennett's commentary, and I think also, obviously, you commentate over every Sunderland game, and your life is non-stop Sunderland now. It's like when we hear you, it's like you sort of are a Sunderland fan with us and you're watching the game. It's like when we score and a goal goes in, you're celebrating the goal. I think one example I can think of is when Max Power equalised against Fleetwood. Like that commentary from you was like superb when he scored that goal. So I think I think we do like hearing that from you as well.
I like to be as passionate as that. I get criticised sometimes for not being passionate enough, and when I analyse those criticisms. One of the reasons is because I'm actually mentally double checking that I've got this goal scorer right. It's great when you get a Grant Ledbetter smashing one in from 25 yards at Doncaster Rovers. It's absolutely clear who's scored the goal, and there's such wonderful strikes, and Max Power, as you mentioned, that it's very easy to get passionate about those. The hard goals to predict are the ones when there's a melee in the penalty area, or you're doing it off the stream and you're not quite sure, as the other night when McGeady scored. You're not quite sure as to whether it was Ledbetter or McGeady, and you're waiting for the camera to pan to the goal scorer. And then it's in those moments that, in a sense, those few seconds actually can suck the passion out of you, because you're too busy concentrating on getting the goal scorer right, because you don't want to embarrass yourself in going well over the top and then having to correct yourself. So there's a balance, and it's a lot easier when there are fans in the ground as well, because you can get swept up in the emotion when Sunderland score. So that is easier for the commentator to feed off that, if you like. I do try to be passionate. Look, there's another fact. I've been commentating over 30 years, and my voice has changed. There's no that there are biological reasons why I can't reach the heights anymore when it comes to sort of some of the goal celebrations in the past, like Andy Reid's against West Ham, for instance, all those years ago. So there are copious reasons for the change or for how you celebrate a goal.
Yeah, I think it's also good as well to show the passion, because you're also commentating for a lot of people who aren't actually watching the game; they're just listening to it. So I think when you commentate, you're sort of giving them a feel for the game, as it's going on.
Yes, you are. You're also very conscious that the people at home who we have a lot of blind listeners or elderly listeners, or people who, for one reason or another, just can't get to a game or can't watch the game. and we're their eyes and ears. And another complaint sometimes is, why do you waffle on about what you can see over the top of the stand at Scunthorpe United or wherever it might be? But that's a sort of intrinsic part of the experience of being at the game. That's another thing we miss from not going to away games at the minute. We can't embellish the colour, if you like, of being at the away game. And they're important details for people at home. I mean, people are very, mindful that they concentrate very hard on what you're saying. They can pick up the ball-to-ball play, if you like. But you want to add a bit more to the experience. You want to try and build up a picture in those people's minds of what we're seeing, where we're sat in the stadium. And so I think it's important to try and to build up colour, to build up a picture, at the same time not losing sight of what's actually happening on the pitch.
Yeah, I know. I see a lot of people. Well, my dad listens to the radio a lot when he's when he's just out working around in London. He works, so I think as well, you hear when the fans are in the stadium as well, you hear like a goal, and you hear the crowd cheering, but you don't know whether it's actually a goal or not, and you sort of rely on the commentator to say, oh, it's actually a goal. Another thing I can remember as well is the 3-2 at home where Defoe scored the third one. I think the fans were so loud that they couldn't even hear you like shouting over the thing, because I think Sunderland uploaded the match on YouTube with yours and Gary Bennett's commentary, and when Defoe scored, the crowd was so loud that they couldn't even hear you speak. But I think that is important to sort of let the people listening know what's actually happened in the game, because otherwise they wouldn't know.
It is, and that's a perfect example of where the crowd carries you, because games like the 3-0 win at the Stadium of Light against Everton, when you could physically feel the stadium, the actual floor of the top of the West Stand moving underneath our feet. It was such a dramatic night. There's the other aspect as well. People say, why do you get excited when the away team score? Well, if you're deadpan, you're listening on the radio and you only got half an ear to it, you wouldn't know if I wasn't excited, because it would just roll into a blur of commentary. So you've got to accentuate the moments in the game, whether it's a home goal or an away goal. Those moments have got to be accentuated to make them stand out. That's fairly critical, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that's all good to hear though, and everything's it's strange that's going on this season, but it's good you're back commentating now, and we're all lucky that football's back for a little bit. So now I think we'll start going through your Sunderland 11. So this is a team I think you've, based on your time sort of watching the club from 2003 onwards. So we'll start with your goalkeeper. Who have you gone with in goal?
Vito Manoni. I have to say that the 11 it's a rather eclectic, random choice of players, if you like. But and a lot of it's built on my relationship with the players, and how I sort of saw their influence at the time, and how important they were, within my working life, if you like, covering Sunderland. And Vito was a keeper that I always had a good relationship with. We always enjoyed interviewing Vito. I mean, there were some good keepers at Sunderland. Mark Poom, is another name that leaps out and could easily have been my first choice. But Vito was the keeper with whom I had the sort of best relationship when it came to the goalkeepers. A really lovely guy, spoke very, very good English, very, very approachable, very friendly. He actually wasn't a bad keeper, actually. And the night that stands out for me was the night at Old Trafford when Sunderland, won through to the final of the League Cup, and the hilarious sort of aftermath when Vito, who doesn't drink, was having to do a drugs test after the game. He just couldn't pass water, to put it in those terms. So they had to give him a couple of pints of lager. And Vito was basically off his tree. Couldn't do the post-match interviews or anything, because for a non-drinker to suddenly have to down a couple of pints of lager on the adrenaline of having just taken your team in a penalty shootout through to Wembley was a story I think that will last a long time. But a lovely man. Vito's a really good guy, and I was sorry to see him go, actually, in the end. And he was unfortunate because he got caught in that sort of horrible goalkeeper's dilemma of Costel Pantilimon coming in and who was going to be first choice. And I think there was a feeling at the time that Manoni might have got the jersey at the start of the season, but he didn't. And I think that effectively dictated it in the long run that Vito was not going to hang around.
Yeah, I agree with you though. You can think sort of his first season at the club, Kieran Westwood was there as well, sort of him and Kieran Westwood, and then it was sort of him and Pantilimon, and then when in the last season in the Premier League, we thought, oh, okay, Vito Manone, he's our number one, he's going to start every game, but he gets injured, then here comes Jordan Pickford, and then Jordan Pickford proves himself and then kicks Manone out of the team. So I think Manone never really had a full season, in goal to prove himself.
He didn't. He was always the fall guy in a way, and which is a shame because I think you could understand he was committed. He was committed to the football club. He certainly loved Sunderland, and he was a character, and he fitted in. And as I say, we in the press really liked Vito. He was very, very approachable. He was always ready to talk after games, whether they'd won or lost, drawn, whatever the result was. Vito was always prepared to talk. And of course, we'll all remember the game at Southampton, the 8-0, and Vito was at the forefront and afterwards sort of, driving that campaign for the supporters to get their money back, which, the rights and wrongs of that have been long debated after the game. But, Vito had the club and the supporters at his heart, and he embraced it, and he embraced the football club while he was here. And I'm sure now he would still look back very, very fondly, if somewhat frustrated by his time at Sunderland.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we were really sort of unlucky to lose him when we got relegated to the Championship, because he was sort of playing pre-season just before the Championship season, and then he goes to Reading, and then we get Jason Steele in and Robin Reuter, and you just think with that Championship season, how many silly goals that we let in. A game that springs to mind for me is when we played Millwall at home, winning 1-0, and Reuter makes those. I mean, any other goalkeeper might have saved them. Like the two ridiculous goals that he let in. If we just had a better keeper in goal, that's like another few points that we could have kept and maybe could have stayed up that season. So in my mind, it's crazy how we didn't keep him for that season.
Yes, I mean the calamity of the keepers that season is well versed, and I mean you're absolutely right. If there'd have been a competent keeper in for the season, the points tally would have been a lot higher, and I think they would have stayed up. But aside of the problems at the football club, the structure and what was going on upstairs, the key thing would have been to stay in the Championship and rebuild from there. But unfortunately, it was a catastrophic season on many fronts. But I think to highlight the goalkeeper situation is right, because that was one of the main problems that season, and some sort of continuity in that department, and it may have been a completely different story.
Maybe, but I hope that Championship season's long forgotten about, hopefully, and we focus on sort of better seasons at the club. But yeah, no, that's a great choice for your goalkeeper. We'll move down now to the fullback. So we'll start with your right back. Who have you gone with at right back?
Phil Bardsley, because the fact he's still playing now in the Premier League, I'm still a bit mystified as to why Sunderland released him. Because I think if they had a will, they'd have been able to keep Phil. I think the fact that he's still, as I say, playing in the Premier League just shows that he was, a decent fullback. And again, he's another player that had the club at heart. He was one of the ones that was always dependable to talk to after a defeat, especially away from home. Had some, as you well know, there have been some wretched results away from home over the years, and Phil Bardsley was always someone who was prepared to come out and face the press following those defeats. It's very hard when a team's lost to pick out a player who's prepared to face the music, if you like. But Phil Bardsley was never one to shy away from it. When he was asked to do it, he would always step up and do so. And I always sort of commended him for that. It's not an easy thing to do. They're in the firing line, but he was a fullback who I think gave his all. And I think I think when you look at Bardsley and some of the other players that came from Manchester United at Sunderland, you can see, that their sort of football education under Sir Alex Ferguson, and they were in many ways a class apart. And Bardsley is one of those. And all the time in the world from him. And when I'd seen him since, after he moved, he'd still come up and say hello. I had a great deal of respect for him, and I think as a fullback, I actually think he did a pretty good job. The fact that Sunderland, players will always be criticised and they'll always come under the spotlight, and they're always, to a certain extent, flawed because that's the level at which Sunderland are playing at, or financially wherever they are. Phil Bardsley would always give his all, and I think for me, he is the prime example of what a fullback should be.
Yeah, Phil Bardsley, a player I think we never really replaced, and there was talk of extending his contract, but we didn't quite sort of meet his requirements. And he thought, the time he sort of gave to the club, he thought they should have been giving him a little bit more, and he decided to move on. But who did we bring in after that? Billy Jones, and then Phil Bardsley was such an integral part to that team, a player who really stepped up, in massive games, like the derby, and he was there really, and he was absolutely gutted sort of when we lost the 2014 League Cup final. But yeah, Phil Bardsley, just that top player, and yeah, as you said, still playing in the Premier League now, and a player we never really replaced. So I definitely agree. He's a player that I remember really well as well. Great shot on him as well. Scored some great goals.
He did, yeah, he did.
For a right back.
And his marauding run to score against Manchester City.
Yeah, exactly. There was like that also the goal against sort of Man United in the at Old Trafford in the League Cup semi-final. I mean, that if that wasn't like sort of meant to be, I knew even when he kicked it and it was going straight into De Gea's hands, I just knew it was going in. I just knew, and when sort of De Gea hit into his own goal, yeah, it was meant to be. It was the only little bit of luck we really had in those years. All right, then. So that's great for your right back. We'll switch over now to your left back. So who have you gone with at left back?
Julio Arca. I don't, again, he was such a servant to the club, and he still is actually. He still keeps in contact. He's still very much someone who's got Sunderland Football Club, emblazoned in his heart. He loves it. He's very much someone who put down roots in the area. I know he's back in Argentina at the moment, but he's talking about coming back to Wearside to live. He was just a fabulous character, a fabulous person, a brilliant player, lovely to watch. We'll all remember the jellyfish incident on Roker Beach as well, when he was or Seaburn Beach, when he was stung when they were training on the seafront. Lovely guy, great left back, real character, and someone again who, a player. We often talk about players who are committed to the football club, and try and get players to bond in that sense. And Arca was one who exemplifies, I think, what everybody expects of a Sunderland player.
Yeah, he was one of those people that came to the club like a little bit like how Gary Bennett did, just sort of came in and stayed in the Northeast. How he after Sunderland, he went to Middlesbrough as well, and then also getting to sort of the end of his career as well, he went to South Shields, I think as well. So he was always, he loved the area, so he sort of stayed, and it does show really when people come to the area, the Northeast does get under people's skin, and it was nice to see someone who came from Argentina to really connect with the area.
Even still, though, his accent's still quite thick.
Yeah.
It's a nice Argentinian Sunderland twang.
Yeah, I know. People have said that. I know it's very good. Yeah, Julio's well loved amongst the Sunderland fans. So yeah, that's a good choice for your fullback. So head now to your central defenders. So do you want to start us off with one of them?
Well, shall I start with John O'Shea? Shall I start with the experience rather than his partner, who we'll come to? But John O'Shea, again, look, I mentioned Phil Bardsley being tutored at Old Trafford by Sir Alex Ferguson, and John O'Shea is again a prime example of someone who was an absolute consummate professional. Lovely guy, always got on really well with John. He was, over the years he came in for a fair amount of criticism at Sunderland, and at the stage of the career he was in when he was at Sunderland, inevitably it led to John making mistakes. But I think, overall, he was a fantastic servant for the club. great to have around the dressing room, great to have around, with the media. And as I say, just a very nice bloke. We sometimes sort of criticise players like O'Shea, and I think he came in for unfair criticism. But when you look at his CV, when you look at the games he played and the games he played in for Manchester United, I think he really deserved our respect rather than criticism, because his career stands up to scrutiny. He was a fantastic servant for Manchester United, and he was. He stood up to be counted at Sunderland as well, and again, I come back to this, issue about Sunderland and the players that they sign over the years. Yeah, they've made mistakes, but on the whole, they're they're not in a ballpark where they can sign your Lionel Messi's or whoever. They're inevitably going to pick up players who are flawed to some degree. But John O'Shea, to me, just exemplified professionalism. And again, he was very proud to wear the shirt, and and hopefully he'll do well in management. That's always what he's wanted to go into doing. I know he's at Reading, and he's done all his badges, or was doing his badges, and I'm sure he will go in to management somewhere. And fingers crossed, he makes a big success of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got a great memory of John O'Shea as well. I was his mascot, actually. I got the chance to walk out in the Stadium of Light, a picture with him. It was against Spurs back in 2013. We did lose the match 2-1, so I didn't bring the team any luck. But anyway, yeah, it was a great experience. And yeah, John O'Shea again was a great professional as well. You had those great years at Man United and came to Sunderland, and it was sort of one extreme to the other, from going to win sort of Premier Leagues and Champions League to fighting relegation. It was sort of two different things, but he's a great experienced player, and I'm sure when he goes into management, it will be something that sort of really does help him in the future.
Oh, without doubt.
Yeah, sorry, go on, carry on there. It's fine.
No, I was going to say, I was going to echo everything you sort of said there about John. It's players like that. I think. Again, I think at the time, sometimes the football clubs aren't aware of what they've got, in the club, in terms of, the experience they can bring to the team, to younger players, especially. I mean, John O'Shea's one who certainly will put an arm around younger players and encourage, the younger players coming through. So I think, that's important.
Yeah, no, completely agree. All right, then. So we'll switch over to his defensive partner, who you've got in the back four. Can you tell us who you've gone with in this position?
Well, it might raise a few eyebrows, but because technically he wasn't the greatest in the world, but he probably had the biggest heart of any player at Sunderland that I've known in the 17, 18 years that I've covered. That's Nyron Nosworthy. Nugsy was just a character. From the moment he arrived from Gillingham, I mean, to think that, he cost, what was it, £12,500. In he came.
Sure.
And, what we always loved were those mazy dribbles from one penalty area to the other one, and then the ball blasted into the roof. He was just a brick. He was just fantastic. He was such a lovely guy. I've worked with him since and spoken to him since, and he hasn't changed. He has that Frank Bruno-esque way of talking, and he is just, at the time, he was mocked and he was ridiculed, I suppose, but I thought he gave his all for the football club. And when he was in the team, he didn't try to let you down in any way, shape or form. He really put 100% into every game. And we all remember the scenes at Luton when Sunderland won promotion back to the Premier League. And Nyron, when you look at the pictures now, is at the fulcrum of that, the centre of the celebrations. I mean, really was, just a character, just a fantastic guy to have around.
Yeah, do you know what? The episodes that I've done, the guests that I've had, Nyron Nosworthy's actually been chosen quite a few times because
has he? It doesn't surprise me in lots of ways because of who he is.
Yeah,
Yeah,
again, a player just connected with the fans really. I had some Rory Fallow from the Wise Men Say podcast. He come on and he said, it's sort of one of his best memories of Nara Nosworthy is when he had the ball and he tried to pass it back to the goalkeeper and he just passed out of play for a corner. It's just
yeah.
just like little things like that that they remember. And I wasn't laughing about it at the time, but look back now and just think, he was that player that a lot of people did connect with. Myron.
Yeah, that's it. People could connect with him. There was a connection with Naran because of who he was and how he loved the football club. He wore the red and white stripes very proudly, and he again, he's another of those players that really understood what it meant to the fans, and he embraced that. So yeah, that's why Nuggsy's in there.
Yeah.
Not for his talent, but for his character.
Yeah, that's fair enough. So that is your defense. That's your goalkeeper, defensive back four done. So you've played a 4-4-2. So we'll move on to the wingers now. So we could start off with the person on the left.
On the left, I've put Bolo Zenden. There's some slightly sort of positionally. These are a little bit awry. The two wingers. They're not technically wingers, they were more central or sort of attacking midfielders. But Bolo Zenden, for me, was one of the most talented players that I've seen at Sunderland in the sort of 18 years that I've been covering them. He also was an absolute gentleman. He was a pleasure to interview, absolutely fantastic to interview. I mean, he speaks 3-4 languages. I think he's got a law degree. I think he dealt with all his own contracts and so on. Highly intelligent, really lovely guy to interview because he was engaging and he would engage you in the conversation. In many ways, you dream of getting players like that at a football club to interview because they are such a pleasure to talk to. And even after he's left, a few times I've seen him when he was at Chelsea, he would make a point of coming up in the tunnel afterwards to shake my hand, say hello, and have a quick conversation. True gent and truly talented player, and to this day, still remember his goal against Spurs, which was just outstanding.
Yeah, Bolo's in. He was a great player, and I think I've listened to a podcast that he's done since leaving the club, and I think he said he left the club because he felt the ambitions of the club weren't high enough for him, and he thought, I don't think this is for me. It was after we finished 10th in the Premier League. And he said he thought, do you know what, the squad that we have is really good. He said, we've got a really good squad here. And he thought we should have finished higher than 10th. But then sort of the ambitions were, let's just stay in the Premier League. He didn't like that. He was like, we should be pushing on for Europa League, Champions League. Like, we're good enough to do this. And he just, it wasn't for him really. And I think, I thought, Bolo Zenden just sort of went for a little change. His contract ran out. But it wasn't that at all. He really did feel that he wanted something to do well, but he thought if they're not going to meet my sort of expectations of my ambitions, then the club wasn't for him. And it was really a shame to hear that because he was such a good player.
Well, again, like John O'Shea, Phil Bardsley, he was schooled in, that his CV. You can see where, he's an ambitious player. Even at the age he was when he came to Sunderland, he still had ambitions. And I'm sure he's still now, I know he's coaching in Holland, will still have ambitions, no doubt, to be a manager himself, or certainly have an influence somewhere. And he will always set the bar high. And he did set the bar high. I mean, we had those conversations, we had those interviews. And he was a challenging interview in lots of ways because he was so bright and he did think so highly, or so deeply about the game, which is why he was so fascinating. But, on top of that, his English was absolutely exemplary. Another case that we get a player who comes from abroad and whose English is absolutely, in many cases better than the English. So Bolo ticked all the boxes, and I just thought he was a wonderful, wonderful footballer. Technically gifted, genuinely nice guy, pleasure to interview, and I think he would be in many people's first 11s.
Yeah, no, you make all the great points there. Yeah, I completely agree. So we'll switch over now to the other wing. Who will be running down the right?
Well, I've got Seb Larsson on the right. Again, you can level at Seb many of the things I've just said about Bolo Zenden. Seb is always someone who was, honest after games. It didn't matter about the result. If they'd lost, he was open. He was honest. He didn't try and make excuses. He was always forthright in his criticism or, his explanations of what had gone wrong. He, again, I think was a clearly talented player. I mean, the fact that he's still playing in Sweden and still playing for the Swedish national side, or until recently, I think he still is. He perhaps we can look at his free kicks sometimes and feel that maybe he should have delivered more from the free kicks that he took. But nonetheless, when he did deliver, they were fantastic. And again, he was a genuinely nice guy to talk to. And while he was at Sunderland, he respected the shirt. And I think he would still now admit he's got a soft spot for Sunderland. Genuinely, I think when I look at that team, I put those two wingers in. Those two on their day were unstoppable and real additions to any squad.
Yeah, Seb Larsson, you could even tell from his debut scoring that goal against Liverpool. Straight away, that's where he set the bar, and the Sunderland fans went, oh, because they weren't too sure getting a player from Birmingham who'd just been relegated from the Premier League. But in that first season, he did so well scoring those. I remember he scored that free kick against Arsenal. That was an incredible free kick. And I think, Larsson was just obviously towards the end of his Sunderland career, he wasn't that first choice player, but when he was good, he was
when he was good, he was good. I mean, when he was bad, if you like. But so consistency, in fairness, was an issue for Seb Larsson. But I think 9 times out of 10, you'd certainly put him down on your starting 11 team sheet.
Yeah, absolutely. So those are your wingers done. So we'll move to the central midfield. Now, what I can see of what you've chosen, this is a very solid central midfield.
This is the nitty gritty. This is if you're allowed to use that term these days, in inverted commas. This is the hardcore centre of the team. We've got they're flanked by the talent, and in the middle you've got. Well, let's start with Kevin Ball. I mean, Kevin Ball wasn't in the team when I started commentary on Sunderland in 2003, but he was in the team when I had done a handful of Sunderland games in the previous years when Kevin was in the team, and also I was commentating when Kevin was in the Sunderland team that beat Newcastle 2-1 when Ruud Gullit was in charge at Newcastle. Kevin, to this day is the standout central midfielder at Sunderland. In 18 years, I don't think we've ever seen his ilk or his replacement, because he has everything that any Sunderland fan wants to see in a Sunderland player. His talent might have been raw. His commitment was 100%. His love of the club is 100%. And what he offered in the middle of the park for Sunderland Football Club has proved to be irreplaceable. And we've never seen the like of Kevin Ball since. And yet, what do we always call for when there's a transfer window? Someone who can play in the centre of midfield for Sunderland, like Kevin Ball. And he was. I think I'd be surprised if he's not the first choice on nearly everybody's first 11.
Yeah, I love the story as well when he first came. That he tells when he first came to the club, because he wasn't loved straight away. He had to really earn his way. He had to earn the fans' respect, really. And he said he came up from the south coast, didn't even know Sunderland had a beach. He came up here and he loved it, really. And he is everything that Sunderland is, and he stayed in the northeast now. You shake that man's hand and straight away.
His grip. He's got one of the firmest grips in. I'll tell you what, Lee Butler pushes him for a close second, actually, the goalkeeping coach now. But Ballie's got probably one of the firmest grips in football.
Yeah, absolutely. So you just know straight away, even now when he's off the field, you just know who he is. And again, someone who's still involved in the club, in my opinion, should be a little bit more involved. I think he was about sort of 10 years ago with the academy, but I think he's now sort of just an ambassador at the club. But
his most recent role has been to sort of nurture the under-23s. He's been keeping an eye on those that have gone out on loan. So he had a big role to play with Jack Diamond, for instance, going to Harrogate Town and keeping an eye on Jack at Harrogate, and being involved, Elliot Embleton to Grimsby and players like that. He's certainly been someone who's always been close to the player, and we know how close he is to Jordan Pickford and Jordan Henderson, for instance, because of the influence he had on them when they were at the academy.
Yeah, and do you know what? I think someone like Kevin Ball in the club now, I think he could be used so much better. I think he should be, say, part of the coaching staff. I certainly do think he should be a lot more involved of what's going on, because that's someone who knows what it takes to play at this club. And you see a lot of players now going onto the pitch who they're almost like frightened of the pressure. The pressure gets too much for them, and they don't realise what club they're playing for. Have a player like that in the dressing room who actually sort of can help educate these people and help them through. I think it'd be really, really good for the club, if I'm honest.
Well, who knows what's in store now with the new regime? Fingers crossed he gets some sort of recognition and involvement, because, as you say, look, his CV goes before him in that respect. So fingers crossed.
Absolutely. So we have your midfield partner, a bit more of a modern sort of version of him. Would you like you to
the Sorcerer's Apprentice, Lee Cattermole? For many of the same reasons actually as Kevin Ball, because Lee wore his heart on his sleeve. Look, he was flawed. We all know that. He'd be the first to admit he's not the most technical. He's not the greatest player on the planet. But he would give 100% for Sunderland when he put that shirt on. He lived and breathed it. He just, he would run through a brick wall for Sunderland. And, that commitment I loved in Lee. He was great to interview. He's always been, very approachable. And, again, another of those players that you enjoy to interview. You enjoyed his company. He's always been polite, would always stop and say hello. I think, again, in the last decade, he's a player that, again, exemplifies what fans want to see in a Sunderland player, someone who will wear their heart on their sleeve, are committed, love the club, and whatever their deficiencies, they overcome them in the sense that they are, that they don't go out there to not perform. They are as hurt as anybody when they lose, but it's just circumstance. I think over the years, Cattermole has been unfortunate with injuries, his knees, his back. If he hadn't had those problems in the last few years, I think we'd have seen a lot more of Lee Cattermole. But unfortunately, he made his debut when he was young at Sunderland, wasn't it? Of course, and I think we had a long conversation a season or two ago about Lee and his sort of the fact that even though we thought he was relatively young, late 20s, early 30s at the time we were talking, he was basically, excuse the sort of cliche, he was hamstrung by those injuries. The wear and tear on Lee Cattermole of his career, unfortunately, took its toll on his sort of latter years at Sunderland.
Yeah, well, in 10 seasons, he made about, 260, something like that, appearances. I mean, in 10 years, you should have a lot more than 260 appearances. I think John O'Shea, he has the most Premier League appearances for Sunderland, but that player should be Lee Cattermole. He'd been there sort of the longest, really. I think it was a shame for Cattermole, but the sort of player that he was, the way he just threw himself on the line for everything, you can't expect him to not get injured, really. But yeah, Cattermole, great player. It's pretty much been there my whole Sunderland supporting life. I remember my first game at the Stadium of Light. It was one of his 2009-10 season against Blackburn Rovers, 2-1 at home. And I just remember him running down the wing with the ball, and a left foot cross from him and straight onto Kenwyne Jones's head. Just things like that from a very young age of 20, 21. And it just shows that if these players are young, like how Jordan Henderson was in the team at the age of 19, these players, they don't have to get to 24, 25 years old to start breaking into the team. If they're good young, then they're really good in the team. So yeah, Cattermole was just everything that we wanted in a player as well.
Maligned at time, yes, he literally threw himself at players, but again, commitment unquestionable. So that's why he's in there with Bawley in the centre to give the team, give my 11 some sort of a spine.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So we've got your goalkeeper, defenders, and midfield. So at the moment it's looking very, very solid. We'll move on now to your two strikers who will score all the goals. So do you want to start us off with one of your strikers?
Well, I'll start off with Marcus Stewart. People might raise a few eyebrows, but especially from when he first arrived, of course, in that woeful season that Sunderland were relegated with the then lowest points total. But I look at Marcus as from my perspective as when I started covering Sunderland in 2003, and Marcus then was at the forefront of Mick McCarthy's team, and then led into promotion with Mick McCarthy. Marcus Stewart for me was again someone I got on really well with. It was a pleasure to interview, and he did deliver. He did score goals. His hat-trick at Gillingham stands out. His goal at Wigan when they were promoted, and he weighed in with goals. He weighed in with the goals that he'd originally been signed for. Yes, maybe the Premier League, he'd seen better days, and that was too much for him. But he was perfect for the Championship as it is now, Division 1 as it was then. And as a person to have around to interview, and what he gave to the team, I actually always had a soft spot for Marcus Stewart. There have been players, strikers since him that would probably in terms of goals scored, goals delivered, all-round contribution, probably would be above him in the pecking order. But from a personal perspective, Marcus Stewart has always been one of my favourites.
Yeah, that's what it's all about. It's your favourites. It's what I've said to people as well. When I name this series My Sunderland 11, it's your 11, not the best 11 or the worst 11. Your 11. So yeah, that's a great choice by you. So his striking partner, the person who scored all the goals alongside Marcus Stewart. Who will that be?
It would be. I couldn't leave him out, Jermaine Defoe, because the effect he had on the football club and the team. We all know. Even now, this day, we're recording this. I'm hearing him talk about Bradley Lowery and the relationship he had with Gemma Lowery and the Lowerys. But his contribution on the pitch, what a goal scorer for Sunderland. And, who will ever forget the goal at the Stadium of Light when it was slammed into the top corner just before half time against Newcastle. But his goals overall, teams cry out for strikers, and Sunderland, hit gold dust when they signed Jermaine Defoe. And so it would be very remiss. I actually always enjoyed interviewing him as well. So, another reason, again, for my personal choice, someone that, I always look forward to talking to. Got his hat-trick at Swansea, of course, hat-trick against Exeter as well. He was an out-and-out striker, goal scorer. He had, again, Sunderland etched on his heart. And so, he had to be up there alongside the inestimable Marcus Stewart.
Yeah, absolutely. Jermaine Defoe, man, if we kept him, obviously, if we stayed up in the Premier League and kept him, he could have been a great player. I mean, he could have sort of been the next sort of Kevin Phillips. I reckon he could have got up to the same sort of goals total, really. With the goals,
possibly. I do think that, what he showed after leaving Sunderland perhaps showed Sunderland had him at sort of almost the peak of his career. I think to attain those heights, he would have had to have serious partnerships with people who really put him in the zone, if you like. But yeah, unquestionably, I think looking at the time he was at Sunderland, he was a true servant for them.
Yeah, absolutely, and his class off the pitch as well was just as good on the pitch, and he was never afraid to just speak to fans, and he had a lot of time for the fans as well, which is always nice because as fans you spend all this money following the team, hotels, fuel for your car, everything really, and to see players give it back, it was something we all really love. And yeah, Jermaine Defoe, I think at the age of 33, 34 when he was at the club, we all I'm not too sure about him, but I remember the people at the club have said, Jermaine Defoe at the age of 34 was by far the fittest player in the whole club.
He was obsessive about fitness. That's one reason why he had the longevity that he did or does, because he kept himself very, very fit.
Yeah, and of course he's still sort of going now with the Rangers in the Scottish Premier League. Really, obviously not sort of reaching the heights, but you can still see him there. And the age of what is it, 37, 38 that is at now. I'm sure retiring isn't sort of in his head yet because he just lives his life so well. And yeah, Jermaine Defoe, it was I think it was an honour for him to sort of come to us and for him to sort of give those years to us really, and his memories. I think his sort of best memories probably would be at Sunderland. He says the best goal he's ever scored in his career was that volley against Newcastle, at the Stadium of Light.
Yeah, I mean, it was some truly memorable, fantastic goal.
Yeah, of course. So yeah, Jermaine Defoe. But he's also got an OBE now with his work to the sort of foundation charities. Yeah, Jermaine Defoe is a top player, and one I remember very well. And I was gutted when he left. But yeah, so that's your 11 done. Now, if you had to have a manager to manage this team, who would you have?
My top choice, Roy Keane. Absolutely fantastic to deal with. Every week when we went to interview Roy or post match was, you enjoyed it. It was great. He was a real, he had a presence. He had I know he had a reputation, but I mean, his reputation went before him. But actually, working, in the media with Roy at Sunderland, you saw the other side of that reputation, and he was just a sheer pleasure. And it was great sadness when he left. It unravelled for him at the end, and that's a great shame. And when you read through his autobiography now and read about how he regrets how it ended and what an opportunity he had at Sunderland and what he may have achieved. We could argue, all day, all night long. But while he was here, just fabulous to deal with. And I think I'm speaking for all the press who covered Sunderland at the time. We all absolutely adored Roy. He was so good to deal with and work with that he undoubtedly sits top of the tree.
Yeah, and obviously you see his work with Sky now as a pundit, and I think people aren't too sure, how. I mean, it's great to hear that. It was great sort of to interview because I'm never too sure myself whether he's sort of a fiery character to interview. One I probably wouldn't like to interview after he's maybe lost 3 or 4-0 or something like that, But so he was quite a good person to interview then.
He was very, very. I mean, talk about defeats when they lost 7-2 at Everton. You'd expect this sort of a tirade of foul language and an exploding Roy. He couldn't have been calmer. The angriest I think I saw him was when they won 4-2 at Sheffield Wednesday. They'd thrown away a couple of late goals, and famously, I remember someone, I think it might have been Scott Wilson off the Northern Echo, asked Roy as he was walking out of the press room following the match and the Inquisition. Roy was asked by Scott, any injuries? And Roy just turned around, looked at him and went, not yet. And there were moments like that, there were so many moments like that. But he was so good to interview. He was always calm. He would test you. You had to be, you had to know what you were talking about. You had to be on your mettle. You couldn't glibly go into an interview and try and wing it. He would suss you out straight away if you did. He would throw questions back at you. That's what always threw the reporters at away games, is they didn't know him. And when he threw a question back at them, they were basically living in fear. They thought he was about to bite their heads off. In fact, he wasn't. What he was trying to do, what he was doing was teasing them. Basically, he was playing a game. But if he asked you a question, if you knew your stuff, you'd answer it, and everything was right with the world. But you, as I say, you had to be on your toes, and you had to. The first thing he said when he arrived, if you show me respect, I'll show you respect. And I always remembered that with Roy Keane, and I think it's a very important adage anyway with any manager or any player. I think it's an important remit for any journalist or any sports reporter. Show respect, you'll gain respect. It's all part of being professional, and that was what Roy was largely professional. Let it slip now and again, but on the whole, that's Roy. That's the character that Roy Keane is. But compulsive, obsessive, funny, engaging, intelligent. A great person to deal with.
Yes, I think Roy Keane, obviously a manager who sort of got us out got us out of trouble, really got us promoted out of the Championship and got us in the Premier League and just sort of stabilised the club. And then it pushed on for, obviously, he went, Sprazier came in, and then Steve Bruce, and they were pushing top half of the Premier League. I think what an opportunity, yeah, obviously Roy Keane had to keep us up. And I think he's sort of the last manager we've had to really, obviously, to get us promoted out of a league and then keep us in the Premier League. And I think, you know, we need one of those managers who the players look at and just think, like, they sit down, listen to his team talk, and just go like, "Wow, you know, that's Roy Keane talking to me."
Roy had the benefit of the career he had as a player, so that's always something that footballers will, you know, they have to respect. His flaw, and there were a few, but I think the main one was he didn't appoint a stronger right-hand man. Tony Loughlin, you know, I gather is a good coach. He's well liked. I think he's at Burnley now, isn't he? Or was at Burnley. He did try and bring in Brian Kidd, who I think would have been the perfect foil for him as a manager. And had, you know, Brian Kidd come in, I think Roy Keane would have lasted a lot longer than he did at Sunderland, because he needed someone who wasn't afraid to stand up to him and wasn't afraid to question some of his decisions, some of his decision making when it came to signing the likes of El Hadj Diouf, etc., were flawed. They were mistakes. It disrupted the dressing room, and he should have seen that. And I think with someone a bit stronger alongside of him, those signings probably wouldn't have been made. But you know, that's hindsight. That's the benefit of hindsight. I think Roy himself would put his hand up to those mistakes. He certainly wouldn't shy away from admitting mistakes that he's made. But it was a sort of golden couple of years, if you like. It was a time that, you know, covering the football club was an absolute pleasure. It was, you know, you bounced into work like an eager puppy. You know, it was just a very, very good, feel good few years.
Yeah, and also, obviously, after Sunderland went to Ipswich and then never really managed again. He was sort of an assistant manager at Ireland and at Nottingham Forest. But you just think, we all thought at the time, what a good manager he is. And then, yeah, he just hasn't sort of managed since, really, you know, as a sort of that first manager. So it's surprising in some ways, but I think he does want to get back into management soon if he is given the chance. And I think he's a person that I think a lot of Sunderland fans would like to see back at the club.
Well, undoubtedly, whether it be a good thing to come back, I don't know. But I think, you know, he himself admits he made a mistake in going to Ipswich for a number of reasons. I think then he's decided that, you know, his best move was to learn the job, if you like, from the inside, and why he took the assistant manager's jobs to learn the trade, if you like. If he is looking to get back into management, I'm sure he's looking to make sure that he's coming back to the right club. And I think, you know, the fact, you know, he's first to admit Ipswich was the wrong club is an illustration that he will look very, very carefully to whatever job he would walk into to see that it was the right club for Roy Keane. And that's important because Roy Keane is a complicated character.
Absolutely. And yeah, I've completely agree. I think once we get the club in a better place, I think it would be a good time to bring it back. You know, after sort of the takeover, maybe if we get back into the Championship, I say maybe get back into the Championship. So hopefully we do. And yeah, I think he'd be the right person to bring back and manage the team. So hopefully we do see him back at the club. But yeah, so that is a very solid team you got there and a great manager to manage the team. So I mean, I just want to say thank you, Nick, for your time and sharing the stories with us.
Pleasure. I hope everyone enjoys it.
I'm sure they all did. As always, the video is in association with the Sunderland Food Bank, so all details on how you can donate will be in the description below. If you did enjoy the video, please leave it a like and do subscribe to the channel. It's very much appreciated. But yeah, we'll see you all in the next episode. Thank you all for watching. How are the lads?